Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of Benchwarmers. I'm your boy, Benjamin, coming at you live from my palatial state in Oakland, California. Once again, the for Benchwarmers, the title is wrong. I don't know why I changed it before I went live. So, anyway, I guess we'll just make do. I assure you, we're not going to be talking about Campfire and Blur Tree and more. We did that on recap last week. But anyway, for this show, talking sports, baby. But if you're not able to catch the show live, you can always catch us on YouTube at Hat-Club. Be sure to subscribe to us, which is a fancy word for follow, and give us a like if you like what you see. JM1620, punctual as usual. Steph M40, correct. Yes. I tried it 3 different times to get it fixed before we went live and before the stream elements title came up. Didn't help. Didn't help at all. Whatever. Flashfire, I'm sorry you're tired. I will hopefully, lull you to sleep. Third in line. What's going on, brother? And Elk Dot in the house. Love to see you, man. Southside Steve Wright. Benchwarmers, baby. Hustle Mac. No, I mean, we just talk about sports. And then tomorrow, Tuesday, is Flip the Script, where we play video games. And then Wednesday, of course, is going to be recap, in which case haven't got notification that the recaps hats have shipped out yet. So hopefully they get them out today. Hopefully. Yodi Fitteds, what's going on? Keep capping. It's cracking. Yeah, dude, I was gonna say I was sick for like the last 2 weeks, and I'm finally starting to get it together. Elk Dot just hating, man, just hating here. Just no. The series is 1-1 right now. Pacers and Knicks. Like, come on. And I would say, if anything, the Pacers still hold the higher ground on account of what happened in the postseason last year. But you know that. Anyway, usually starting off the show with New Jersey acquisitions, whatever. But because I did the show this last Friday, I pretty much went through the entire wad. So I've got nothing to show. Although I did get a box in the mail a little bit ago, which has my hat that I designed for Christmas. I'm not going to show it off because I don't want to get fired. But I will say it came out beautifully. Better than I could have expected. Coloring is perfect, and especially for the inspiration of it, which is one of my favorite Christmas gifts of all time. Shout out to my mom for that one. Yeah. So, well, we'll definitely show them off on recap in the upcoming weeks. So, fuck you, Steven. You bastard, man. It's what I get for like sharing anything with you. Exactly, Flash. I don't know when Austin's going to be popping in and spying on me and stuff like that. So I'm not going to take the risk, but Steven just blowing it as usual. But anyway, so just going to start the show off just straight up. And we're going to be talking about the Heisman Trophy because we are in the final 2 weeks of the regular season, if you want to call it that, for college football. But of course, there's an additional week, so technically 3 weeks for certain schools. Jared Clark, what's going on? 3 weeks for certain schools who finish well enough in their conference, and so they actually get to play in a conference championship. Already locked up their last weekend. So I'll go into details about that one specifically in a little bit, but I want to start with the Heisman just because of the fact that the last couple weeks have been really spurts and stuff, the most deserving, who's leading and what. To be honest, over the last couple of weeks, like 3, if not top 2, was kind of exciting, just as the fact that University of Oregon has only had one Heisman winner. That, of course, was Marcus Mariota. God, a decade ago. Jesus, I can't believe it's been that long. So to see Dylan Gabriel in the mix, much in the same way that Bo Nix was last year, and you could make the argument that Bo Nix probably deserved it last year, but I ain't mad about it. He's doing great for the Broncos right now, so good for him. But personally, for me, it's just like based on the season that Dylan Gabriel's had, I didn't really feel like he should have been top 5, but I wasn't mad about it. But after this weekend, things have definitely shifted quite a bit. So to look at, of course, I'm always on the BetMGM app. This is what BetMGM says is the favorites to win the Heisman this year. I only went with the top 4. Jalen Milroe is tied with Dylan Gabriel at plus 3,000. So technically, I probably should have thrown 5 spots in there. But because of the fact that Alabama is in the position that they're in, I didn't include him because realistically, I don't feel like he has a shot at it. So anyway, Travis Hunter, minus 400, becoming the favorite to win the Heisman this year. And without a doubt, his resume kind of speaks for itself, playing on both sides of the field or both sides of the ball, more specifically. So you could say, he's playing some Iron Man football, definitely merits a little bit more respect. At the same time, Ashton Jeanty of Boise State also having an incredible year for a running back that we haven't seen in many years. Cam Ward tearing it up at the University of Miami, and then of course Dylan Gabriel in the mix, who I've been talking about a little bit ago. So I kind of want to break down the numbers as far as like where this is kind of going. And I'm going to start with the consensus favorite right now. So for this season, I included his receiving, his rushing, and his defensive stats. I had to include the rushing stats because up until this last game, it wasn't relevant. Travis hadn't rushed the ball at all, and so they decided to do it this last weekend against Utah. Did it 2 times. He got 5 yards, and he got a touchdown out of it. That's relevant because of the fact that his receiving stats, which a lot of critics and experts have been focusing on, I would honestly say are not great, but they are exemplary. 911 yards on 74 receptions, 12.3 average yards per catch, 9 touchdowns on the season. But then you have to, of course, take into account his defensive stats, to which case 3 interceptions and 1 forced fumble. So pretty solid all around, especially if you're going to be playing on both sides of the ball. So nothing to hate on there. But then we look at Ashton Jeanty from just a running back perspective, 256 carries, which is significantly more than a couple other players, but it's the way it goes. Boise State's a run favorite offense, and so you kind of got to make do with that. But 1,893 yards, more than likely with 2 games left in the season, and especially the average that he's been putting up this season, he's going to eclipse 2,000 yards potentially in the next game. But 26 yards on the ground, or sorry, 26 touchdowns on the ground, and 17 receptions because occasionally running backs do run RPOs and pass plays. So 98 yards in the air plus 1 additional touchdown. So 27 touchdowns on the air. So doing the comparison from just a touchdown perspective and especially from a receiving perspective, Travis Hunter, obviously from a receiver standpoint, definitely exceeds what Ashton is doing this year. But then again, at the same time, when you talk about just specific running back stats, the fact that the kid's going to hit 2,000 plus yards before the season is over is absolutely incredible. Not to mention the fact that he's registered 27 touchdowns on the year. Unbelievable. So going then to Dylan Gabriel, and it's still funny to look at his stats just because of the fact that this is Cam Ward. My apologies. Cam Ward, third college that he's played quarterback at. And like I said, having a great year. I'm not hating on Cam Ward other than the 2 years that he played at Washington State. But this year, he's going to surpass all of his numbers for that. His touchdowns obviously have already established themselves there, but 3,494 yards in the air, 32 touchdowns, and throwing 6 interceptions. But compare that to Dylan Gabriel, who's been a hot talk also on his third college, hot talk of the Heisman campaign discussion for the last couple of weeks. 3,066 yards in the air, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Now, the reason why this is a big deal is because over the weekend, Dylan Gabriel accounted for 0 touchdowns. And that's also from a rushing perspective, which I forgot to mention for Cam Ward. 3 touchdowns on the ground for Cam Ward, 6 touchdowns for Dylan Gabriel. So both quarterbacks can do it in both ways, either with the arm or with the legs. But just do the math on that, 28 total for Dylan Gabriel and 35 total for Cam Ward. So from a yardage, from a total touchdown perspective, I still felt like Cam Ward was the better quarterback on the season. And this last weekend kind of proved it. However, because of the fact that the University of Miami took that loss to Georgia Tech, that's why Cam Ward's stock fell a little bit, at least from a Heisman perspective. So, kind of going back to things overall, I mean, realistically, the way that I see it, it's really coming down to Travis Hunter and Ashton Jonty. And I'm not against either one of them winning it. I feel like what both players are doing right now is incredible, and especially for the programs that they're part of. Colorado got beat up last year, Deion Sanders' first year as a head coach in top D1 fashion. Obviously, he was with Jacksonville State previously and did incredible work there from the HBCU perspective, but getting into the Pac-12, now Big 12 for Colorado. And, a lot of people, just based on the way that Colorado performed last season, didn't have a lot of faith in how they would do. But they also felt the same way about BYU. They felt like they were going to be a mid-tier conference team. And BYU, despite this last weekend at Kansas to go to 9-1 on the season, Colorado outperforming everybody right now with a 7-2 record. And so for Travis Hunter to be playing at this top level of a caliber for what's up, S man? Playing this top level of a caliber for a team that is not only bowl eligible, but potentially going to make a run at the Big 12 championship game as long as, you know, other teams got to lose and stuff like that. Um, I feel like Travis Hunter definitely is top of the table. And then at the same time, it's Ashton Jonty just doing stuff as a running back that we haven't seen in decades, not since like Barry Sanders at Oklahoma State. So at the end of the day, like I said, it's going to come down to these two. No matter what Miami does in the ACC title run, because they're still top of the table, tied with SMU right now. So they'll have their championship game as long as neither team loses from between now and then. And then on top of which, Dylan Gabriel for Oregon. Like I said, Oregon's already locked a spot in the Big Ten championship game. That game will actually count in regard to the decision making that goes on for the Heisman. Bowl games do not, but there's a whole different perspective just because the fact that the conference championship games still fall within the regular season format. So, anyway, the way I see it, I personally feel like Ashton Jonty is a little bit more deserving of it, but by like a slight hair. I don't want to dismiss anything that Travis Hunter has done. I feel like he's had an absolutely incredible season. I feel like Colorado's having an absolutely incredible season. But the fact that Ashton Jonty, like I said, going to cross over 2,000 yards, definitely for this next game, and potentially finish the season with well over 30 touchdowns. That's a big deal. And doesn't matter how, quote unquote, the school is, it's more based on the performance. And the fact that the biggest game that Boise State played this year was against Oregon. They only lost by a touchdown, and Ashton Jonty performed remarkably, as begrudging as it is for me to say that. He had a fucking hell of a game. So I would hope to God that he's a lock. I would hope to God he's a lock for this. Anyway, moving on into college football. There it is, Colorado besting Utah. That's going to come up later for Ben's bets because I blew it on this one. Totally thinking that Utah was going to somehow bounce back from their controversial loss to BYU in the Holy War, but not the case. 49-24, Colorado Buffaloes. Moving on to that 8-2 record. I said they were 7-2 a little bit, but I hadn't gotten to this. So anyway, Clemson with a win over Pittsburgh, 24-20. I would have much preferred Pitt to get this one just because I'm not a fan of Dabo Sweeney. I'm not a fan of Clemson, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, Texas, I'm not going to say easy win over Arkansas. Arkansas has been playing teams surprisingly well throughout the season. Of course, their biggest win was against Tennessee about what was that, a month and a half ago? Granted, it was in Arkansas or in Fayetteville, more specifically, when that game happened. So here's another home game against Texas. They only lose by 10. I feel like for as much as people are putting Texas up on a pedestal, they probably should have dominated this game a little bit more. And then looking back on other wins that Texas has had, especially against Vanderbilt, they only won by a touchdown. I question how Texas is going to do once the season is over and once we get into the playoff format, because right now they are a lock and still a couple more games to go to completely screw that up for themselves. But I still feel like Texas is going to be in this. I just don't feel like Texas is going to make a deep run out of this. Ohio State versus Northwestern. This game was at Wrigley Field. I like that. The Wrigley Field, the baseball stadium aspect of games, but at the same time, if you guys actually watch the camera angles in this game, it was god awful. But Ohio State got the win despite the fact that Northwestern started the scoring in this entire game. 31-7 was the final score. 35 nothing. Tulane over Navy. Navy, after that Notre Dame game, has just fallen. But Tulane just continues to build their stock a little bit more. Um, yeah, yeah. Alabama, easy win, 52-7 over Mercer. This is one of the things I hate about the SEC, and I've brought this up last year. What up, dude? I'm not gonna say your name. Oh, Fakur. I'll say it that way. One of the things that irritates me about the SEC is they will schedule out of conference ass whipping teams at the tail end of the season. Georgia's doing this weekend against UMass, and then here's a prime example of Alabama doing it to Mercer. For whatever reason, no other conference does this. Again, granted, at the same time, they do all their easy out of conference ass kicking games at the beginning of the season. You know, you got to warm yourself up before you go into conference play. But it's always been strange that at the SEC would do this, and especially I'm going to talk more in detail about Oregon. I mean, bias aside, but how incredible Oregon's last 8 games have been, and why I respect what the Big Ten, the former Pac-12, I'll say even the Big 12. I'm going to throw in this, even though I've always consistently hated the Big 12, but I have a lot more respect for them than I do for the SEC this time of the year. So anyway, Illinois back on the win track, 38-16 victory over Michigan State. SMU squeaking out a 10-point win against Boston College. Boston College did have SMU on the ropes for quite a bit of this game. But SMU still having a bit of a Cinderella season, 9-1 right now. Got to keep winning because I need to see that Miami SMU ACC championship game, and I need it now. Notre Dame, another win for them, 9-1. They move up to 6th in the country, 35-14 over Virginia. 49-10, Penn State over Purdue. No surprise there. South Carolina. This one came down to the very end, much in the same way that Missouri over Oklahoma did last week. So some pretty surprise plays that had to occur. But South Carolina, who should have a better record and should have a win over Alabama a couple weeks ago, which I'm still crusty about because that cost me money. But 34-30 victory over Missouri this weekend. Big upset, I will say, and especially full credit to Coach Dillingham and Kenny Dillingham and the Arizona State Sun Devils. 8-2 right now, and especially based on all the legal issues after Herm Edwards left, after Antonio Pierce left, that they're still dealing with. And Kelly Dillingham just riding the ship. Big wins over UCF. They go against BYU this weekend. I'm kind of thinking an upset's going to happen, although strangely enough, I think actually Arizona State is the favorite in this game. But going against, at the time, number 19 Kansas State. I think a lot of experts and a lot of analysts would have figured that Kansas State was going to roll over Arizona State for having not really watched what ASU has done this season. So 24-14 victory over Kansas State. That's a big deal. And especially a big deal for Dillingham, the program, and going into additional recruiting once this season ends. Boise State, this game was a lot closer than the scoreboard looks like, just because at one point in the game, San Jose State was up 14-0. And then, of course, Ashton Jeanty changed the entire trajectory of this game. 42-21 final score for Boise State. They move up to number 12. But yeah, here's the game I want to talk about. Oregon, Wisconsin. Flashfire, I agree. Boise State was definitely a step away from being down 21-0. And I'm really curious to see how they would have dug themselves out of the hole had they gotten themselves in that position. But Obviously, cooler heads prevailed. Um, Oregon, Wisconsin. So if you guys watch Flip the Script, when I played Michigan and especially when I played Wisconsin, those were the two games because it's like one, Oregon is the number one seed against Michigan. When I played, I was nervous about that just because Oregon going back to the big house for the first time since what 2007. This is a blend of video game and reality that I'm talking about here, of course. So I was just kind of nervous, even though Michigan is having an off year after winning the national championship last year. I'm nervous. I'm nervous about every game, and especially road games in a brand new conference in some of the biggest stadiums, most fan-filled stadiums, more specifically, that you can encounter. But Oregon did the job. They won by 21 against Michigan, so no big deal. But before the season started, I had said this is the one game because it's at the tail end of the year. It's the last game in 8 straight Big Ten challenges that Oregon's have or Oregon was going to have. And this goes back to what I was talking about the SEC and how they get a lighter schedule toward the end. Oregon, I would say, over the last 2 months has actually had the hardest schedule in college football, maybe with the exception of like Penn State or Georgia, whatever. Um, but this game was one I was nervous about. And my wife and I were contemplating going to this game just because she's a big Wisconsin fan. I, of course, am an Oregon grad. But the only reason we didn't go was because the Packers were playing a road game the next day. Had the Packers been playing at home, we would have done the doubleheader. But what I didn't realize, or I didn't foolishly look into, or I foolishly did not look into, is where the Packers were playing over the weekend because they were playing Chicago. Chicago's only like a 2-hour drive from Madison. So we should have done it. 16-13 final score. This is about how I thought the game was going to go because I, in no capacity, felt like Oregon was going to cover the spread or beat the spread. Just because Wisconsin typically plays a very run heavy attack offense. Every game that I've seen Wisconsin play this year, they do great in the first half, and then for whatever reason, they fall apart in the second half. And here's a prime example of that happening because at halftime, Wisconsin was up 10-6. Oregon had 0 touchdowns going into the second half. Everything was done or everything was scored because the leg of Atticus Sappington, and especially because the legs of my favorite running back of all time. Not really of all time, but my favorite current running back, Mr. Jordan James, who had a great year or had a great game. James, of course, did score a touchdown in the fourth quarter, at the beginning of the fourth quarter, after Dylan Gabriel and I always call him Turd Ferguson. But yeah, Ferguson connected on a scary 4th and 9 play to kick the fourth quarter off. And all of it, I feel like, comes from an energy boost because of Wisconsin's fourth quarter entrance song, Jump Around by House of Pain. And Dan Lanning, the psycho of college football coaching, getting his players fired up, encouraging them to actually jump around, just like the fans, just like the players, and completely changed the trajectory of the game. And I couldn't be happier for that because it got Jordan James in the end zone. It gave Oregon a lead, and then it was just defense, defense, defense. Shout out to Mateo. Uyagale. I think I screwed up his last name. I apologize. Definitely the player of the game. And in real life, the actual Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week. Sealed the game with a sack. Also had an interception at the very last possession that Wisconsin had. But Wisconsin, surprisingly, has a pretty solid receiving core. And I was kind of making fun of them on Flip the Script just because the fact that Wisconsin really hasn't had a solid quarterback in a long time. But this kid was slinging it pretty well. And for whatever reason, Oregon's secondary, they played well, but then Wisconsin just kept having the ability to move the ball every now and then. But everything worked out. Oregon retains its undefeated season, hangs on to its unanimous number 1 position, and thank God, because I was a goddamn wreck throughout this entire game. Georgia, Tennessee. Um, it was close. I mean, great first half, but then Georgia just took over in the second half, holding Tennessee to 0 points. And of course, this game was at Neyland Stadium in Knoxville. 31-17 final score for Georgia. Tennessee only dropping to 10. Georgia back in the top 8. Texas A&M easy victory over New Mexico State. Once again, SEC at a conference schedule. 38-3 was the final score there. They jump up to 15. Iowa State back on the win track, 34-17 over Cincinnati. Shocking loss for Washington State, who had just been blowing people out at least since their early season loss. But 38-35 final score, losing to New Mexico. Surprising. And then, of course, I already talked about this, the Kansas BYU game. BYU had so many opportunities to put this game away. And for whatever reason, they kept running plays the exact opposite of how effectively they had been moving the ball. Um, Once they got in the red zone, if they got to the red zone via the run, they decided to go to the pass play, in which case interceptions were thrown. If they were throwing the ball well, they decided to run the ball in the red zone, in which case stuff, not taking field goals when they probably should have, etc. So yeah, only 3 undefeated schools left in college football. That, of course, is Army, who goes up against Notre Dame this weekend. Indiana, who goes against Ohio State at the Shoe this weekend. I will definitely be watching that game. And of course, your Oregon Ducks, the last undefeated school in that. And this, of course, was the last college football game to talk about. 41-20, UNLV over San Diego State. The other thing I want to mention in regard to Oregon being undefeated, um, this is a weird stat, kind of more of a funnier thing to really talk about. Oh, Flashfire, thank you. I meant to grab it, but because Louisville is longer ranked, that's why it didn't fall within the top 25 scores. Stanford with a massive upset win over Louisville. Louisville was ranked number 19. They fall out of the top 25. Thank you, Flashfire, for bringing that up. So the thing I was going to say about Oregon, it's a weird, but it's a funny stat. And I don't know how much longer it's going to last. But Oregon, the only school that's left in the country right now, undefeated football team, undefeated men's basketball team, undefeated women's basketball team. And the women's team is ranked, even if it is ranked 25. But both the basketball teams for the men and women are 4-0 on the season. So not exactly an easy feat. And the men's team almost blew it against the University of Portland this last week. So anyway, here is a look at the top 25 right now. As I said, University of Oregon, unanimous number 1, followed by Ohio State, Texas, Penn State slipping back them to 4. Indiana, despite being undefeated, somehow behind Ohio State and Penn State, but you can blame that on strength of schedule. We will sort that out this weekend, as once again I say, Indiana versus Ohio State at the Shoe. Notre Dame jumping 2 spots. Alabama jumping 2 spots. Georgia up 3. Ole Miss up 1. Tennessee drops down 4 to number 10. Miami at number 11. Boise State at 12. So there is your college football playoff top 12 at the moment. BYU was in it. They were a top 4 team just based on the fact that they were still undefeated. But of course, that loss to Kansas took them way back to 14. And at the moment, out of the college football playoff. But I personally feel like if Ohio State wins this weekend, Indiana's going to drop far. To which case, that's probably going to be the best case scenario for both SMU and BYU. But if Indiana wins, what does that really do to Ohio State? I don't know. I don't know. They'll still be in the top 10 just because it's a weird scenario that Indiana has put themselves in just because they're undefeated right now. And it's one of those things that experts and analysts can't really answer because of the fact that Ohio State, being a blue blood and a pedigree of college football, is going to have more favoritism. Granted, Ohio State's only loss on the season, of course, is to the number 1 Oregon Ducks. So if Ohio State loses this weekend, not only do they become a 2-loss school, but then it's like, well, the only losses we have on this season are to the 2 undefeated teams. But it's like at the same time, it's like, okay, great. But why does Indiana get punished for having a quote unquote easier schedule and being undefeated? and yet Ohio State comes out, has 2 losses potentially if they lose to Indiana this weekend, and still remains in the top 10. That makes no fucking sense. So shit's got to get fixed. But anyway, moving on to the NFL. Not a terrible weekend, but not great. I'm at about 50% right now. Hopefully the Texans cover the spread tonight to help my pick'ems out a little bit more, because right now I'm 7-6. I would much prefer to go 8-6. This was not one I picked correctly. I took the Raiders plus 7.5. It was looking good through the majority of the game until they got to the fourth quarter, and then 34-19 final score for the Dolphins. This is another one I got wrong. For whatever reason, I took the Browns plus 1.5. Don't know why I did that. Saints win 35-14. This one I did get correct. I took the Colts plus 3.5 points. Aaron Rodgers, absolutely horrific full season with the Jets. Just keeps getting funnier and funnier. The fact that they went through a quarter and a half of just straight 3 and outs, not a single first down, is probably one of the craziest things I could have predicted. Anybody could have predicted this season. And there were points where the Jets actually had a decent lead on the Colts. But hey, shout out to Anthony Richardson getting the starting job once again as the Colts quarterback and orchestrating the win, 28-27, final score there. Vikings covered the spread as well, 23-13, 10-point victory over the Titans. I think the spread was only 6 points. Good for them. And this is one I got right because I don't remember doing it, but apparently I did it. I took the Bears plus 6.5 in this game. Now, in no way, shape, or form did I think the Bears were going to win. When I made my prediction last week, so last Wednesday, the first available, or Tuesday, the first available day that I can make my picks, I didn't think Jordan Love was playing. I don't know why that was stuck in my head, but of course he did this weekend. And surprisingly, at Soldier Field, the Bears put on a pretty decent show. So needless to say, when it came down to the field goal at the end, I had already solidified my victory just based on the point spread. What I was not expecting was the Green Bay Packers to block the field goal. I probably should have, just on account of the fact that the one thing my wife always likes to bring up with her boss, who is a lifelong Chicago Bears fan from Chicago, is that the Packers own the Bears organization. And over the last 11 years, you can definitely say that. And this last Sunday was no different on that. So 20-19 victory via blocked field goal for the Green Bay Packers. Absolutely incredible. This one I got wrong. I took the Jaguars plus 13.5. 52-6 final score for the Lions. My God, things are bad in Jacksonville. Got this one right. Took the Rams minus 5.5. 6-point victory over the Patriots. Thank God there. Another one I got correct. I took the Steelers plus 3.5. Shout out to David Kearns. This was the only game I had available in the morning, and it was a good one. Defensive grudge match between these two division rivals. 18-16 final score, Steelers over the Ravens. Another one I got right. I know there's a lot of Niner fans in here, but I definitely took the Seahawks plus 6.5, which was kind of risky considering the fact that they were playing the game at Levi's. But based on what had happened their previous time playing and the Seahawks waking up in the second half and keeping it close, I was not expecting, once again, that the Seahawks would win this game. I just figured it would be close because, one, division rival, they always play it pretty tough. Two, the Niners have a tendency, and especially at home this season, to kind of blow games or at least keep them close in the last 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. And this was a prime example of that because Geno Smith orchestrating a perfect 2-minute drill, runs in for the final touchdown, puts on the Steph Curry, put him to sleep at the end of the game. Well deserved. But Seahawks win 20-17. Makes things really interesting for the AFC West or the NFC West. And I'll show you guys that here in a second. Bo Nix, 4 touchdowns in the air on the day, one of which, of course, to his college teammate Troy Franklin. 38-6 final score over the Falcons. And the Bills, they did it. Thanks to Josh Allen's legs at the very end for that 20-yard scramble for a touchdown. No way this is going to overtime. And thank God, because I took the Bills -2.5. In regard to the Falcons Broncos game, I got to go back on this one. I took the Falcons, and goddamn, they let me down. I also took the Bengals in this game. It was a 1.5-point spread. And I was talking with David Kearns before the game started. It's like, man, I'm kind of feeling the Chargers on this one to take it. And especially considering the fact that the Oregon Ducks had done so good over the weekend and got the win. And for whatever reason, if you look at this season, when the Ducks perform well, Bo Nix does well, Justin Herbert does well, and I should have stuck to my guns on that one. Especially with the first half, because at the end of the first half, it was 27-6 Chargers. But then Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and the return of T. Higgins, which is what motivated me to stick with my pick. I think it was +3.5, actually, Bengals, not 1.5. They made the comeback and tied it up. But 2 missed field goals by McPherson is what let the Bengals down. Justin Herbert orchestrated a brilliant 2-minute drive to get that final touchdown at the end of the game. 34-27 Chargers, making things interesting in the AFC West. So here's the standings. Even though we talked about them on Friday, I'm coming back on it. So Bills outright winning this division. They're 9-2 right now. Next closest is the Dolphins at 4-6. They're toast. Chiefs getting their first loss on the season, but only hold a 2-game lead over the Chargers. Over on the AFC North, Steelers, technically 2 games, but just based on the math, but 1.5 games really, because somebody still got to take a bye. That would be the Ravens. But 8-2 on the season right now for Mike Tomlin in the Steelers. Ravens at 7-4. Bengals fall to 4-7. And then the AFC South, Texans hold a very slim margin, even though they play tonight against the Dallas Cowboys and should win. 6-4 right now, barely surviving the Indianapolis Colts by 1 game at the moment. NFC side, Eagles 8-2, of course, got that win on Thursday against the Commanders to spread their lead out a little bit. Eagles still have an additional game in hand to play. Giants benching Daniel Jones in favor of Tommy DeVito. So see how that goes this weekend. Arizona Cardinals, like I said, NFC West, only a 1-game lead over a 3-way tie between the Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers. As much as you want to say the Niners are kind of blowing it, let's be real. The NFC West is just a lot better than a lot of people want to give them credit for. So still anybody's game, realistically, with 6 games each left to go for all of them? Oh, 7 games. Sorry, 7 games, because they've only played 10. My God. NFC North, not so running away with it. Lions are 9-1, but only followed by a 2-loss Vikings and a 3-loss Packers. The Bears are just out of it, let's face it. And of course, the NFC South still close. Thank God the Falcons lost this weekend because the Buccaneers had a bye week. So I need the Buccaneers to bounce back against Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants. And I could definitely use a Falcons loss again. Got to get them back in the hunt for that. But 4-6 for the Bucks, 4-7 for the Saints, 3-7 for the Panthers. Much like the NFC West, anybody's game still very tightly knit, which actually kind of irritates the hell out of me. Flashfire says fuck McPherson, of course. Flashfire also says Niners still have to play Green Bay, Buffalo, and Detroit. They are in trouble 100%. But hey, the Buccaneers have beaten the Lions and the Niners beat the Buccaneers. So I'm still mad about that one. The Buccaneers should have won that fucking game against the Niners. My God. Hey, you know what I haven't talked about so far this season? Hockey. Not going to go into great detail about it. Just going to talk about how things are looking. But my Leafs are looking really good right now, even without Austin Matthews. Team is coming together. 24 points on the season, just a hair behind the reigning Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, followed by the Lightning. The Bruins are having a bad year, which is fucking great. Fuck the Bruins. But over in the Metropolitan Division, Hurricanes on top, followed by the Devils and Capitals. Then the Rangers, blah, blah, blah. But over in the Western Conference, Jets on top again, just like they were last year. for the Central Division, followed by the Wild, Stars, and Avalanche. And the Utah Hockey Club actually off to a decent start. In the Pacific Division, Golden Knights on top. No surprise there, followed by the Kings, Canucks, and Flames. Unfortunately, the Sharks are in dead last, which we all kind of expected to happen this year. So I don't know if you guys knew this or give much thought about it, but tomorrow, the anniversary of the Malice at the Palace, November 19th, 2004. Hence why I'm wearing Indiana Pacers gear right now, because usually, I don't wear jerseys and stuff on the show. I'll just throw on a hoodie or a t-shirt or whatever. But oh my God. 20 years later, and this game is still just killing my brain, killing my heart of what could have been for the season, just because of the fact that the Pacers look great. Jermaine O'Neal was coming into his own as an all-star, formidable center slash power forward. Reggie Miller started the season on the IL just because he had a broken hand. They had just gotten Steven Jackson. Jamal Tinsley was playing really well. And yeah, Ron Artest, up until that game against the Pistons, was actually putting up pretty solid MVP numbers. And it really looked like the Pacers were potentially going to win the title that year. Rick Carlisle was coaching because he had just gotten ousted from the Pistons. So why not? Like, Carlisle had been an assistant coach for the Pacers under Larry Bird. But because the Pistons moved away from him, they brought him back in just because him and Larry Bird are so tight from their days of the Celtics. Um, Things were looking good. And especially with that game in particular, because under 50 seconds to go, the Pacers are up by 15. And then one hard foul from Ron Artest on Ben Wallace set everything in motion. And if you haven't watched the documentary on Netflix about the Mouse and the Palace, I highly recommend watching, because there are a lot of details that I was filled in about it, like Ben Wallace having a family member who had died, like murdered, died that morning. And so his mental, health was askew. And so when Ron Artest fouled him, in garbage time, essentially, that's what set Ben Wallace off, just because the fact that he had compartmentalized all of his emotion, all of his rage, all of his sadness. And then when Ron Artest fouled him, that's when everything changed. That's why the fight broke out between the two of them. And then, of course, Ron Artest, you know, hitting to the scorer's table to take a break, to get himself out of it. And then that fucking fan throws that goddamn cup of soda at him. And then him and Steven Jackson just tearing into the stands. Like, it's kind of funny to look back on it, just because of the fact that the Pacers just owned the Pistons that night, and especially the fans, and especially that one fan that ran out of the court and decided to, try and front in front of Ron Artest, to only get rocked once by Artest, and then a second time with the uppercut from Jermaine O'Neal. Hilarious to still go back and look at. And the fact that that guy was willing to do the interview and say, "Oh, I wasn't trying to fight him after the game." Yeah, bullshit, dude. But Artest suspended for the rest of the year and part of the following season. Steven Jackson got 30 games. Jermaine O'Neal originally had 25 game suspension, but got reduced to 15. And then even Reggie Miller, who was out in a suit because he was injured, still received a 1 game suspension because he walked on the court. And in which case it's like, well, yeah, man. I mean, what are you going to do? Just sit in the fucking seat while the whole place is like burning fucking down? Like, unbelievable that, they would give him a suspension like that, but whatever. Um, the icing on the cake, of course, is the fact that the Pacers persevered and made the playoffs that year. The only bad part about it, which of course is the worst part about it, is the fact that they ran into the Pistons in the second round and lost the series 4-2. And the highlight of that series, of course, is the chase down block. Reggie Miller going up for an easy layup, and then Tayshaun Prince out of nowhere and getting swat. Um, excuse me. The reason why this sucks even more is because that was it. That was Reggie Miller's last season. He retired after that year, even though I thought, it's like, dude, you can't go out on that. But he did. He stuck to his guns. He said he was going to retire, and he did. And it would have been nice to see him run it back for one more year. If you guys didn't know this, there was the possibility 3 years later in 2008 or the 2007-2008 season where Ray Allen and Paul Pierce tried to recruit Reggie Miller to the Boston Celtics to like really put that team together. And I applaud Reggie for sticking to his morals, sticking to his values, just being a one team for this player his entire career. Didn't go chasing a ring at the end, much in the same sense of like Karl Malone. You could throw Gary Payton in that mix as far as a ring chaser because he did go to the Lakers for that year, which was the 04-05 season, that same season, which case the Pistons did win the championship that year. So suck at Karl Malone, suck at Gary Payton. Although Gary Payton did win the next season with the Miami Heat, but whatever. Um, yeah, man, that was just a weird fucking year. And still broken up about it just because that was it. That was like Pacers had their opportunity in 98, ran into Jordan the Eastern Conference Finals. Then they had the chance in 2000, ran to the Lakers in the NBA Finals, the first of their three straight. And then there was this season. And then there was last season where they lost the Celtics in a straight sweep, despite the fact that they had the lead in the last 4 minutes of three of those games. One of these years, man, one of these years, Pacers are going to be due, baby. Like your entire team is like hurt tonight, which is hilarious. So I don't think they're going to win tonight, but hopefully someday soon they get it. So that would make me very happy. Anyway, closing the show out with Ben's bets, of course. The only one I got right was the Packers over the Bears, and just because of a swat on the field goal. Suns lost to the Thunder, bad. Utah lost to Colorado, bad. I did have a third game in there, but I jumped the gun on it because it was an English Premier League. So I made sure to cut it and paste it to my Ben's bets for this week. So my lock of the week this week, I got the Broncos over the Raiders, money line minus 225. Of course, the Broncos are favored. The game is in Vegas, but Bo Nix and company, I feel like are going to do some work. Tonight, Sharks versus Red Wings. I'm being a little bit risky just because both the Red Wings and the Sharks are not having a great year. But the Sharks usually do well against the Red Wings in San Jose. So I'm kind of playing a hunch on this one. And yeah, Army over Notre Dame this weekend. Now, granted, the last time I picked Notre Dame to lose, it was when they played Navy. So I'm already 0 for 1 on backing the military when it comes to college football. Army, for the love of God, do not make an 0 and 2. You're plus 425. The game is going to be at a neutral site. So if Northern Illinois can beat Notre Dame, an undefeated Army team has to be able to have a shot at it. So I know. And then, of course, my EPL pick from last week that I'm carrying over to this week, Bournemouth versus Brighton. I'm going with a draw at plus 270. For whatever reason, I'm usually pretty good at put it out in the universe. And Southside Steven Seabright with the stat of the night. BHA, which is Brighton, has never drawn to Bournemouth. So, dude, at the same time, last season, I had said Fulham was going to beat Manchester United at Old Trafford, which they hadn't done in over 30 years. And what happened? Fulham beat Man United at Old Trafford. So, as idiotic as this parlay leg seems to be, I'm running with it. I already put the bet in because I was in Vegas last week, so it's part of a 3-leg parlay, which should net me a good chunk of money. I'll bring it up. Even though I shouldn't talk about it because usually if I don't talk about it, they actually happen. Give me 1 sec. I had to log back in. So my bets are. I'm also pissed because I, for whatever reason, forgot to put my NFL bet in before I left Vegas. And I know for a fact that 3 of those legs would have happened. Okay, in 6 years, yeah, okay, give me a break here. Come on. All right, so my 3-leg EPL for this weekend, $5 will get me $285. I've got Chelsea over Leicester City. That's my only favorite pick. Then I've got Nottingham Forest over Arsenal. That is a huge leap for me on that one. But hey, Nottingham Forest took down Liverpool. It can happen. And Arsenal not exactly playing great the last couple of weeks. And then, of course, AFC Bournemouth versus Brighton Hove Albion. That is my draw. So we will see what happens. Of course, I'm going to do whatever I can to remain sleeping and hopefully wake up a winner, not watch any of these games, but we'll see what happens. So anyway, tomorrow for Flip the Script, because Oregon is on a bye week, I will not be playing college football. Instead, I'm going to be playing some Call of Duty Black Ops 6. So if any of you guys feel like joining, I, of course, will announce it on Twitter and such like that. Get some big team deathmatch going, some zombies or whatever. Let's run it. Until then, obviously, Flip the Script will continue the following week because we got 2 weeks of Husky Hate Week. Fuck the Huskies. I'm starting it off right there. Rivalry week starting up for everybody. So you're gonna get your Michigan, Ohio States, everybody. Everybody. Because the Apple Cup already happened. But hey, Oregon, Washington keeping the rivalry alive on account of the fact that they're both in the Big Ten. So it seems kind of fitting that that's the last game of the season, of the regular season for the Ducks, which once again, even though it's at home at Autzen Stadium, I'm a bit nervous about, just because the fact that Dan Lanning, as much as he's improved year after year, still 0-3 lifetime against the University of Washington. And I'm not saying like his job depends on it, but I think the mental health and safety of the Oregon fan base and possibly the relationship that he has with them is probably on the line, because to go undefeated on this season and to take a potential loss to Washington, even though Oregon's already a lock for the Big Ten championship game, you don't want to screw anything up, and especially with the Huskies. And I know Washington ain't what they used to be. I know Jed Frisch ain't Kyle DeBoer, but crazier fucking things have happened, and I'm fucking terrified. Much in the same way I was terrified against Wisconsin, even though everybody's like, oh, Oregon's going to tear apart Wisconsin. No, I wasn't feeling that way. And look at the final score, 16-3. So I got my concerns, but hey, I'm still going to hate on Washington at the end of the day. Fuck them. But anyway, guys, I appreciate you tuning in. Glad I got to do this. Glad I got to be back on schedule. Got to go to Great Mall now. I know it's late, but I got to go to Great Mall now. But like I said, Call of Duty Black Ops tomorrow for Flip the Script. Let's do it. Let's do some zombies. JM1620, I know you're on board. I thought it was going to be a short show, but 53 minutes is still damn near an hour. But as always, guys, take it easy. And if you don't, take it sleazy. Peace.